260 over 240, that's high blood pressure. But if I'm running from the tiger and you slap that thing on my wrist and I'm still running, it's going to be like 260 over 240. I mean, that's on purpose. And so if you ignore the environment, if you ignore the habitat of the human who's being looked at, these things look like diseases. But unfortunately, we've gotten a little bit backwards, or we're a little bit sort of off track in our common cultural way of dealing with that. And that's to then try to change these factors from the outside rather than realizing this is a normal, intelligent stress response. And perhaps we do one of two things, or a combination ideally of both. One, reduce stress. And two, reduce or change the way our body increase or improve our body's ability to deal with those stresses. Make sense? Any questions? Okay. Anybody think that high blood pressure is really easy? Diabetes type 2. They're symptomatic conditions that occur.
I was going to say they're conditions.
Yeah. I mean, you can do a blood test and show blood sugar elevated, but that we call that diabetes, or that we call increased LDL, hypercholesteremia or high cholesterol. That we name them, and there's ICD-10 codes that make it a real disease, and then we have a drug to counteract that. But really, they're just artificially lowering from the outside this one factor, and unfortunately, that actually ends up causing more stress in our system. So then we've talked about this some, but the next piece is to look at what causes the stress in our lives. And so I did get into it a little bit, but kind of to dive into a little bit more, we have those three flavors, like I said, the physical stress. And some of those things are traumas, accidents, falls. Poor posture is a huge one. Back to the cell phones.
Yeah.
I mean, walking through the mall, it's like, shoot, there's going to be an epidemic. I mean, it probably already is. But we do know there's several things, like forward head posture. We know that causes demyelination of the spinal cord and central nervous system. Well, demyelination, kind of like our previous list, has a name, and they call that MS. Not that every time you have forward head posture and demyelinate, you're going to have it be as bad as MS.
Right.
But again, that's not really a disease. It's a demyelination occurring by stress. That's the daily stress. But that's one of them. And then we have chemicals, toxins, dehydration, environmental, toxic foods, and medications. And then the psychological, mental stress, anxiety, work. I'm glad I don't have to have a job. But I understand that when people do, that it's a stressful thing, right? You have a boss. Your boss doesn't make you stress out. But the rest of it.
And maybe coworkers.
Yeah. Exactly. So if we think about the tiger in that example, in those physiologic responses, and then we look at these lists, and we see how many of these are chronic. These are things that we deal with every day, coworkers, poor posture, toxins, toxic food, medication, some of that. We see how it causes a chronic situation, and that's when we start to see this degradation over a long term or on a bigger scale, where we see people have, inappropriate blood sugar regulation, and then they get other symptoms as a result of that, or their digestive system is so shut down that we have decreased serotonin production. And so they do, honestly and literally, feel dissatisfied and unhappy with life. And in a sense, they should, because it's chronic stress. But it's not because there's some malfunction in the body. The body's doing what it's supposed to. It's the driver that's not doing what they're supposed to. What they could do if they want to be happy and have good health. So we're going to talk about 5 strategies to help eliminate stress. And not only eliminate stress, I know it says that there, but also to increase our ability to adapt to stress. Because really, you can't eliminate stress. I mean, some people try to go back to, the old days. I just saw something on Facebook about this group of people who are becoming, I can't remember what they call themselves. But basically, they're back to nature, right? They're going to, they just did some like wild harvest of nuts and berries in some area, and then they migrated up. It's like 20 of them, and they're going to
live off the grid.
Live off the grid, build up. There's some land that they figure out they can go to, and they're going to build their shelters from the surroundings, right? And in a sense, that would reduce the complexities and reduce a lot of the stresses we're talking about. And it does increase other stresses, the physical stresses and so forth. So it's stress, and it's not necessarily that we want to eliminate it completely, because stress is what causes us, again, to grow, to change, and to evolve, which is really kind of what we're doing here. We're not just here to just, live out the string. We want to gain from life. We want to hopefully be wiser, maybe a better friend or family member, be 10 years from now than we do now. And the only way we do that is actually dealing with stress. But the difficulty a lot of people end up having, and why we see so much, for one thing, ill health in our culture, is because that chronic stress is over and above the person's ability to adapt to it and deal with it. That makes sense?
So then, for example, like when people get sick and they end up going to the doctor's like, oh no, you're fine, it's just due to stress.
Uh-huh.
What you're saying is making me think that the term stress is not, like, we have things mixed up. Because you mentioned distress earlier.
Uh-huh.
So it's not that people are under stress, or they might be, but they suffer from distress.
That's true. And so, I agree. And if you think about it, right, you could have two people, you two, could be walking down a dark alley.
Mhm.
You know each other, you're leaving a restaurant, going to the park. Don't park down a dark alley. But if you did, and someone jumps out and they stick a gun in your guy's face and they say, all right, give me all your money. Now, if we measured all these physiologic responses, you both would have increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, all these things, but not to the same degree. And not even to the same relative degree, meaning that, even if you didn't have the same starting measurements, the amount of change would be different. Does that seem likely and reasonable? That's what would happen. You both wouldn't go from 120 over 80 blood pressure to 200 over 160. You might go to 200 over 160, you might go to 210 over 140. It's each of your bodies is going to adapt to that stress differently. So similarly, if you're under the similar type of chronic stress, which in a sense, we all have different stresses, but in a other sense, in the same culture, we all have a common level of stressor. Unless we do a lot of things to change that. But, if you think about the sort of the mainstream news, you hear about all the people that are getting killed, and the economy's bad, and politics, and, so it's a common thing. And the amount of media we're exposed to, that nervous system input, you can make some choices and changes in there. But we are, without a doubt, exposed to much more of that than we were prior. Many people sit all day at work. That's a common stressor. Our food supply, you can pick and choose and work your way through it and make much better choices. But the common food supply, again, is a common stress. So we're all under, kind of like you two now, in the same stress, right? But our bodies are going to deal with it differently. So if you can adapt to that stress, it's a way that you can grow, change, and evolve as a person. And if you can't, then it's a way that overloads the system and causes things like unease or dis-ease, and it can cause system failure, system breakdown, kind of like you blast a power surge into a computer and blow it up, right? So I don't know if it was really a question, it was more of a comment. Did you have a question?
That was more of a comment.
More of a comment. Yeah. Well, then if you think about it, I don't know if that's something that's commonly told to people, like that you're fine, it's just stress. But it's absolutely true. You are fine, and it is just stress. And that's really the answer you could be given with everything. You're fine, and it's just stress. You have these symptoms. You got a huge tumor growing out inside your shoulder. So, you're sort of not fine, but your body's actually working fine. Yeah. It's just stress. So if you deal with the just stress, then the problem, of course, the seeming problem will resolve. And, we see that frequently. There's you don't hear about it because, it is what it is. But there's spontaneous remissions and cures from all these incurable diseases all the time.
Right.
But certainly not if you go down the road chasing to change, artificially from the outside, change these measures rather than dealing with the cause. So strategy one is physical exercise, physical movement. I mentioned one of the stressors, one of the categories is physical. And one of the biggest physical stressors is sort of the opposite of what it used to be. We're not to chop down trees. Inactivity is our issue. We're victims of all that convenience. We drive cars. Many people's because work has sort of turned into a little screen in front of us in a lot of cases. So we sit all day. We sit in front of another screen when we get home often. That's a common thing to get up in the morning. From poor sleep usually because we're stressed out, and then we get in the car and we drive 20, 30, 40, 60 minutes. And we get out, we go sit in the desk for 8 hours, get back in the car, drive another 40 minutes home, and then we sit on the couch because we're exhausted. And we're exhausted because of this chronic stress. And one of our big stressors is this physical inactivity or inappropriate movement. Because if you think about it, it's a great illustration. I've got this dog here because you can, in all of these ways, you can compare humans to any animal on the planet. And we're really not different. I mean, we are. I mean, we're all different from each other. But in a sense, and our needs for health aren't that different. So, I mean, not so much her because she's domestic, but a wolf in the wild, a dog that she dreams of being in the wild. You know, they don't have to exercise, right? And, you know, squirrels don't go to the gym. Birds, they don't like check their heart rate when they're flying around, make sure they're getting their cardio in, right? Because that's just life.
Yeah.
Life is movement, and they move every day. There's no squirrel that spends, you know, a whole weekend sitting, staring at a tree.
TV.
Yeah, or TV. They just don't do it. And I mean, it would be illogical. And so they move. But we, you know, because of our big brains that allow us to do a ton of things. I don't mean like we picking on our big brains. But that's one of those things that we don't move in the way that's appropriate. We're supposed to move every day. We're supposed to exercise and move our bodies. And that spinal hygiene exercise we did at the beginning, not that satisfies all your needs for movement through the day, but one thing it does is it satisfies a certain need, and that is to move the joints of our spine through all of the ranges of motion. Because sitting and all those things I mentioned is one chronic physical stress that is helped by exercise. So is chronic movement. I mean, some people don't sit all day, but maybe they stand all day and do repetitive motion. You know, I have think of a patient of mine who is a carpenter and is doing a lot of roofing, you know, and that's a big physical stress too. That would seem sort of counterintuitive because he's so physically active all day that physical movement, like exercise, would actually help. But it does, because he would allow his whole body to move. And so this says, physical fitness is not only one. Okay. So basis of dynamic and creative intellectual activity. John F. Kennedy said that. I mean, say blah, 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 sorry. But because that's a good statement, and it's an important consideration because there's an interaction between physical fitness and a mental and creative state of being as a result of all of these stresses. And that's one of those things, there's been a lot of studies because a lot of people are aging, baby boomers and so forth. And we want to know, and the honest truth is why this research is gaining interest, because we're seeing the levels of Alzheimer's and dementia rising. And so people don't want that to happen to them. So they want to know how to keep it from happening. So for years it was like, do crossword puzzles, you know, do nasty mental exercise, you know, Sudoku and stuff like that. And not that stuff's not important, because it's great, but they found that physical activity is 10, 20, 30 times more effective at stopping or slowing neurodegeneration, neurologic degeneration, than crossword puzzles. And that's why you may have heard that they call sitting the new smoking. I don't know if you've heard that or not, but that's like one of those little phrases. Sitting's the new smoking. And when I first heard that a year ago or so, I thought, well, that makes sense. You're sitting, you're not exercising, your heart's not moving. I was thinking heart, I was thinking cardiovascular, because smoking affects it. And it is your cardiovascular, but get this, the reason that sitting is the new smoking has nothing specifically to do with getting your heart rate up by exercise. It has everything to do with the fact that you're not moving your neuromuscular system. Because we've been taught through a variety of things, including the medical system of chemically altering our bodies to try to fix things, that our internal visceral organs are sort of the primary thing, and that our body's here to carry these organs around. And if we get our organs straight, then our bodies will be healthy, the rest of our bodies. But the truth is that our organs are really subservient to our neural system, or our neuromuscular system. So if I sit all day, the message that part of my brain is getting is, we don't need this body to be very functional, because all we got to do is this. And so let's put all our resources just into what we're up to, just, you know, cognitive function, and we can start to down-regulate all of the internal organs. Because I don't need my heart to be able to carry me 10 miles running if I'm just sitting all day. And I don't need, you know,